Okay, last day of Unit 9. We're going to do the equations for circles and parabolas. And I'm going to separate the video into two parts because it would be kind of long otherwise, but we're going to cover it in one day because we're going to have block scheduling. All right, so let's jump right into it. Nothing really to review here. The equation for a circle looks like this, and it looks more complicated than it really is. The only parts we're ever going to change, or that we're ever going to put numbers into, are h, k, and r. Okay, everything else is going to stay pretty much the same every time. We may have to move things around to get it into this form, but the only parts we're going to manipulate are the h, k, and the r, and I've told you what those are right here. So h is the x value of the center of the circle, k is going to be the y value of the center of the circle, and r is going to be the radius of the circle. Okay, so let's do an example. I think that's the sort of the best way here. If I want to write the equation for this circle right here, here's what I do. The center is at 4, 2. So that would be this point right here, right? X is 4, y is 2. So what I need to write the equation again is h, k, and r. Well, it tells me the radius right here is 3. K is the y value of the center of the circle. And so that's going to be this 2 right here. H is the x value of the center of the circle. Okay, so now I have all the pieces I need to write the equation. Like I said before, most of the equation stays the same every time. So everything I'm writing down right now is going to stay the same every time. H goes in here, and I know that H is 4. Right, again, h is just the x value of the center of the circle, which I was told is 4, 2. So the x value of the center is 4. Right? The y value of the center of the circle is 2. So I put a 2 right here. And then those two things are equal to the radius squared. So not just the radius, but the radius squared. So if the radius here is 3, over here I'm going to put 3 squared. 3 squared, I happen to know, is 9. So that would be the equation for this circle. What would that circle look like? Well, I already know where its center is. The only other thing I really need to graph the circle is its radius, which I happen to know is 3. And so I'm just going to make a few points that are 3 units away from the center of the circle. And I could either sketch it in like this, which would not look great, or I could sort of cheat and actually draw it in this way. So it looks something like that. Oh, I guess I already did that, but once again, the equation of this circle would be x minus 4 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 9. The nice thing about writing the equation for a circle is you don't really even need to graph it. Again, I can get everything I need from this much information right here. As long as I remember that any ordered pair goes x and then y, it's really pretty simple. H is just the x value of the center. K is just the y value of the center, and the radius is just the radius. And so again, the beginning pieces of the formula stay the same every time. That's going to be the same every time. So I plug in h right here, so 6, k right here, and then I square the radius, and that goes right there. And it's really that simple. And so if I was going to graph this circle, x value is out here at 6, the y value here is at 1, that's of the center, and then the radius is 7, and so it would get out to here, and it would be something like this. Okay, the next type. For this one, it still tells me the center of the circle, which is helpful, but then it doesn't tell me the radius, it just tells me a point that the circle passes through. So the first step here is to go ahead and plot both of those points. So the center is at negative 5, 3. So x is negative 5, y is 3. So there's the center of my circle. And then I'm going to do the point that it passes through in a different color. I'll do that one in blue. X is 1, y is negative 4. And so if the center is up here and it passes through a point clear down here, this is going to be kind of a large circle, right? Because what it means is that the circle is doing something like this, right? And most of the circle is not even visible on this coordinate plane that I have, which is fine because we don't actually need to see the whole circle. Let's go ahead and fill in h and k really quick. H is just the x value of the center, so h is going to be negative 5. K is the y value of the center, so k is 3. The radius we're going to have to figure out though. But the reason I told you to plot this is because it's actually going to be pretty simple, and we're going to go back to the Pythagorean theorem actually to figure out the radius. If I know this is the center and this is a point it passes through, then this line right here is the radius, right? A point from the center of the circle to all the points that the circle will pass through, that's just the radius. So this is r right here. How do I figure out how long that line is? Well, maybe some of you have already guessed it. I'm just going to create a triangle, a right triangle, like this. Here would be the right angle. And now I just count how long these two sides are, and I can use them to calculate the hypotenuse. All right, so this side right here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the radius squared here is just equal to 7 squared plus 6 squared. So 49 plus 36. 49 and 36 is 85. So r would be the square root of 85. And I'm going to leave it like that for a minute. I could figure out what it is as a decimal, but I actually don't need to, because remember, if the radius is the square root of 85, when we actually go to write the equation for the circle, we square the radius. And so what I would have would be remember, these parts don't change. Okay, I said h was negative 5, k was 3, and the radius is the square root of 85. Well, remember, the part that goes over here is the radius squared, and so the square root of 85 squared is just 85. So over here I'm going to put 85. One other thing I'm going to fix before I'm done. Notice, because h was negative, I have x minus negative 5, just to kind of clean things up. Two negative signs in a row make a positive sign. So the equation for this circle would be this right here. Okay, h, k, the radius squared. And I found the radius by plotting it, figuring out the two lengths of the sides that I would need to create a right triangle, solve for the radius, squared it, and that's pretty much it. What if I start from the equation and just ask to graph the circle? That's pretty simple. I know that whatever's in here in the parentheses with x is my h. I know whatever's in the parentheses with y is k. So I know h, where the x value of the center is 1, y value of the center is going to be 3. The radius is just whatever that is, but the square root of it, right? Because remember, the equation is r squared, so I would actually want the square root of whatever number is right here. Square root of 4 is 2. So I just need to plot a circle with a center at 1, 3 and a radius of 2. So I'm going to go over 1, up 3, there's the center. The radius is 2. So I'm just going to find a few points that are 2 units away from the center, and I can kind of sketch in my circle here. It doesn't have to be perfect. That right there is good enough. Next one, what if I want to write the equation of a circle and all I'm given are 3 points that that circle passes through? First thing I'm going to do is plot these 3 points. A, it tells me, is at 1, 6. So 1, 6 is right here. B, so there's A, B is at 5, 6, and C is at 5, 0. So those are my 3 points. What I need to do now, and I have the instructions over here, so I've plotted the points. There's B and there's C. Actually, I'm going to move C down here. Okay. I need perpendicular bisectors of 2 of the sides. What do I mean by the sides? Well, I'm going to connect these 3 points with a couple of lines. So I'm going to make a line here between A and B. I'm going to make another line here between B and C. I want perpendicular bisectors of both of these lines. I should have just said lines right here. Perpendicular bisectors, that just means a line that's perpendicular to another one that cuts it in half. And so I'm just going to kind of sketch those in real quick. Perpendicular bisector of AB would look about like this, right? AB is 4 units long, so if I want to cut it in half, I put my bisector halfway between, which would be at 2. And then I do the same thing with BC. I can see that BC is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units long. So I want a line that cuts it off at 3 units. Okay, once I've bisected both of those, I'm going to make a big dot where they cross over each other because that dot is going to be the center of my circle. So I can fill in part of my equation right away. I know that the center of a circle passing through these 3 points has to be at 3, 3. That means H is 3 and K is also 3. So I'm going to put those in here, and I'm about 2/3 of the way done. Now I need to figure out what the radius would be. Well, if I know that the circle passes through A, B, and C, and I know that this is the center, then any line going from the center out to one of these points is going to be a radius. So all 3 of those are radii. So you don't need to do this for all 3 because it would be the same for each one. I'm going to do it up here. So I'm going to say this is my radius, and to figure out the length of that radius, I'm going to create a little triangle here and use the Pythagorean theorem just like I did before. This side right here is 1, 2, 3. This side down here I can see is 2. And so the radius squared is going to be 3 squared plus 2 squared. So the radius squared is going to be 9 plus 4, which is 13. The radius squared here, I could find the square root of that if I wanted to, but r squared is actually what goes over here. So I'm just going to put 13, and there's my equation. Okay, this one's a little bit more complicated, and there's a way more difficult way to do it, but I'm going to give you kind of a cheat code for how to do ones like this, where we start with an equation like this one, and we're expected to graph it. So it doesn't look like the form that we've graphed before. And so what it's asking us to do is use something called completing the square, which you learned last year in algebra, but I don't really have enough time to go through a full review on with you. So this list of instructions over here is meant to make this a lot easier on you. So when you get one like this, here's what you're going to do. You're going to start with step number 1. For the x term, not the x squared term, but the x term. So the x term here, not x equals, the x term in this problem is negative 4x. I'm going to cut the coefficient in half. So the coefficient is just the number attached to the variable. So I'm going to cut that in half. So half of negative 4 is negative 2. So cut in half negative 2. And then I'm going to change its sign. So it's going to become positive 2. This is h. So h for this equation is 2. I'm going to do the same thing for y. Again, the y term, not the y squared term, but the y term. So negative 2y. So the y term is negative 2y. Cut it in half, it would be negative 1. Change its sign, and it's just positive 1. There's k. So I have h, I have k. Now to find r squared, I'm going to take h and k, square them, and I'm going to add them to this number on the right side of the equation. Okay, so I have the number on the right side of the equation, plus h squared plus k squared. Those three things together are going to give me r squared. So -1 plus, what is h? H is 2. 2 squared is 4. What is k? K is 1. 1 squared is just 1. So -1 plus 4 plus 1 is just 4. And so r squared is 4. Super fast, super easy. If I want to fill in my equation, again, h is 2, k is 1, r squared is 4. So every time I want to write the equation for a circle, I start with the stuff that stays the same every time. And I fill things in. H is 2, k is 1, and r squared is 4. And there's the circle. If I want to graph it then, h is 2, k is 1. So again, the center would be right here at 2, 1. R squared is 4. That means that r is just the square root of this. The square root of 4 is 2. So the radius of this circle would be 2. And my circle would look something like this.